episode of Everything and Nothing. My name is Beth, and I'm an innovation coach. I've given an introduction about me, but if it's your first time listening and you haven't heard the introduction, my name is Beth. I'm an innovation coach, and I've been doing different kinds of coaching in my whole life since I was, I would say in my 20s. When I was 24, I got divorced and I started working at a shelter for domestic violence victims. And when I was working there, I was part of the team that would welcome the people that were coming into the shelter. And I would do an assessment and I would welcome them to the shelter. I will guide them and I will show them around and help them get settled, or as settled as they could, with all the situations that were happening or the situation that they were in. So I was really, really grateful for that. But since then, I've been learning how to have conversations with people, open conversations with people where people feel supported and people feel comfortable to share, comfortable to share what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And for this first episode, I was reflecting on what would be a good topic, something that fits into everything that I know. So just like I do innovation coaching, I also do life coaching, executive coaching. I'm also a breathwork coach, and I'm certified in all these modalities. And so one thing that I notice is common in any aspect of life is fear. There you go. So I thought, well, let's talk about fear. Let's talk about what that is, how it looks in different aspects of our lives. So a lot of people have this phrase of work-life balance. I don't use that phrase. That doesn't mean I don't think you should use it. If it works for you, go for it. It's your thing, your way, no worries. I prefer to see this experience as life, and work happens to be part of my big experience of life. So in my life, I have work, I have relationships, I have my physical experience, I have emotions, I have my psychological experience. And so I break it down into different areas. And I noticed that fear, when it shows up in one of them, can actually impact all the other ones as well. So for that reason, I thought, and it felt good to talk about fear, because that is something that if we're not careful, it can destroy everything, make everything feel unstable. And when we have a good handle on it, it actually could mean nothing. It could do nothing to, to us, to our other areas of life. So let's take a look at fear. Let's just unpack it a little bit more. So not too long ago, a few years ago, I was talking to one of my coaches. So just as I am a coach, I also have coaches that I go to. I mean, in my opinion, I'd be very hypocritical if I am a coach and I tell people, hey, come work with me, I can support you, but then I never have my own coaches. So I would say about 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago, I was having a conversation with one of my coaches, and we were talking about, as humans, how do we function? And the summary of that conversation, which went on for about 3 hours, was we summarized that as humans, we tend to respond or be in a space of the root of two places, either love or fear. And they're very interconnected. It's almost like we know one because the other one is there. So, for example, when we make a decision from love, we tend to be aware of all the things that we're afraid of. I'll tell you what I mean. So I have 3 dogs, and one of them is a little Chihuahua. He's about 5 pounds. He's a little teacup. And the house where I live now, there's a red-tailed hawk that flies in and out from the forest. I see it flying right into the, or to the other forest. So it flies across my house, right? And I love my animals. I respect them for what they are, animals. So I love my little dog. And because I love him so much, I'm afraid to let him out without the other dogs present or without myself present, because I'm afraid that that red-tailed hawk might actually come and take him. I mean, I've seen that hawk dive down for a rabbit or a little bunny. And my 5-pound chihuahua is just about looking like a little rat or a little bunny. So that's an example of a really basic example of like love and fear and how they go hand in hand. And my fear can sometimes become so much because I love whatever else so much. And when I'm not careful and that fear starts overshadowing everything, the thing that I love the most might actually suffer. If I keep the example of my dog, if I continue to be, or if I would let fear take over, and I would say, well, I'm so afraid of that bird, I am going to not let the dog out at all. And I'm just going to keep him, and kind of humanize him and just carry him and take him out only in a little patch of land. Well, that's for me not all good, because the animal deserves to be free. He deserves to go out. So what I do is I have to find a way to give him the freedom that he deserves, my little chihuahua, while respecting my feelings of love and fear of losing him, while respecting the red hawk-tail that lives here. Because another solution would be someone would say, well, just shoot the bird, which goes totally against who I am. No. So I have a lot of respect for life, my life as a whole, and I also have a lot of respect for everything that is part of life. And that animal, that bird that kills bunnies and rats and all the other things, squirrels, also deserves respect, right? So this is fascinating, this conversation. I told you these conversations are always going to be about everything and nothing. So I started talking about one specific thing, and I can see how it's already connected to so many other aspects of life. So that's one thing that you're going to notice when we have these conversations, or when I have these conversations, is I have this way of seeing things as everything is connected. And some of you may be nodding and saying, yes, I agree with you. And if you do, yes, then you're with the right person. If you disagree, that's okay. I want to know. I'm curious, to hear how you may say nothing is connected. Everything has its own little compacted space. If I was to hear someone say that, then I'm open to experience that perspective. And the only way to experience it is to hear other people say what they think, what they believe, what they see. So going back to the fear. So that's the conversation we're having. This conversation about, as humans, we tend to be making decisions from either love or fear. And sometimes when those two get really interconnected, it becomes really, really tricky to make decisions. And the same thing goes in any aspect of our life, whether it's a decision that it's career related, at work, relationship, and I have so many examples that are coming to mind right now. I'll give you another example. I just finished telling you a little bit about me and being divorced at 24. I got married when I was 21. I've been married twice. You're going to learn about this as we move along. I'm pretty open. That's why we're talking about everything and nothing. But point of my story is, when I got married first time, I was 21 years old, and I really was in love with this person, right? So I made a decision out of love. And the reason why I got married so young, some people ask me, why did you get married so young? So I'm originally from Mexico. I was born in the 80s. And so I was also born in a small village. So I grew up in the 80s in a small town where it was very traditional. a traditional way of thinking. I'm not saying Mexico is the same way right now. There are some areas that still are, but a lot of areas are a little bit more open-minded, and they have shifted their ways and their traditions and their perception and their way of thinking, which is fine. We're all evolving. But at the time, it was different. It was more like it was very common for people to get married young, and it was very common for us to have children young. So when I was 21, in my world, in my perspective, based on what I knew and how I grew up, I was actually late. I kept thinking, I'm really old. By now, I should have like 2 kids. Because, people that I knew would get married at like 18, 19, and by 21, they would have a kid, sometimes two. So at 21, I made a decision to get married out of love and also out of fear that I would miss out, that I would be too old, that I would be, yeah, that I would miss my opportunity to have a family, to have 5 kids. I want to have 5 kids. I wanted to have 2 kids, and I wanted to adopt 3 kids. So I wanted a family of 5. You'll learn more about me as we move through the episodes. But yeah, at 21, I got married, and that marriage turned out to be abusive, right? And it wasn't at the beginning. And I can have a whole episode talking about domestic violence and abuse. Um, it wasn't like that at the beginning. It was fun. It was loving. It was almost dreamy. I was a martial artist at the time. I was a black belt in Taekwondo. That was my passion at the time. So I felt pretty empowered and strong, and I got this. I can do this. And the thing that I was missing was, it would be great to be married and start a family. So out of fear of I'm getting old, I should get married, I met someone. They asked me to marry them. I said yes. And I would say about a month and a half, it started getting um, abusive, just like that. And it started with a simple push. I remember it was shocking because I wasn't expecting a push, and then it's like a push, right? So it's almost like, well, that's almost nothing. Like maybe he was just kidding, and it just kept getting more and more abusive. So what I'm getting at is when I got divorced, because I stayed 3 years in that marriage, I stayed out of at the beginning love for the idea of what marriage was supposed to be and the idea that I had of marriage. And then when I finally decided to leave, I left out of love for myself. When I still remember the day when I looked at myself in the mirror and I saw me, and I saw my eyes, and I thought, what an amazing person you are. You deserve better. And only I can choose better for you. And, there was a whole strategy of how I left that relationship, but it happened. But it happened out of love too. And when people ask me, why did you stay? Well, I stayed because I love the person. I love the idea of marriage, but I also stayed out of fear. I stayed out of fear that I might get hurt. The one day that I asked him for a divorce, like when I was serious about it, he pointed a gun at me. So that was pretty shocking and traumatizing. So what I'm getting at is that's an example of life in a relationship area where we make decisions out of love and fear. And sometimes it can become so tricky to identify, like, what am I choosing here? What's really coming out of love, and what's really coming out of fear, and where is that gray area? So, as I was reflecting on, as I said, on today's episode being the first one, and what conversation did I want to open up? Fear is definitely the one that came up, because I feel it's important for all of us to reflect on things that we're feeling and decisions that we need to make, decisions that are waiting. to be made, decisions that are waiting to be acknowledged. Like, hey, I need to do something about this. And to reflect on what's holding us back. Is what's holding us back fear, or is it love? And it's tricky. It's so tricky to it's so tricky to figure out which one it is, because when we're not in alignment with ourselves and when we don't actually reflect on what is moving, we get stuck. And I know from experience, like I said, back in my 20s, I was stuck. I was stuck for 3 years with, should I leave or should I stay? When should I leave? What if I stay? Could it be better? And then little by little becoming more and more afraid. I don't think I should say anything. This is all my fault. What am I doing here? I'll give you another example of work, because I work, as I said, in the last 10 years, I have been very, very focused on purely innovation coaching. And within that, team coaching and, executive coaching, um, personal coaching. But overall, what I was driving for the last 10 years was innovation projects. And when I first started working in that field of innovation, and I was very creative. I was more courageous than when I was in my 20s, because deciding to leave and deciding to, you know what, I'm just going to get divorced. I don't care if people judge me. I don't care. By the way, nobody judged me. Well, a couple of people judged me, but it didn't matter. But once I made that decision of I'm leaving, I'm moving on, I'm choosing myself, I'm choosing from love instead of fear of being judged, fear of being labeled. I'm leaving because I'm going to be free. I'm going to get to redesign my life. I'm going to get to do something new. I'm going to get to be alive. Like, simple as that. So that big decision helped me so much to overcome a lot of things, which is why I started working in the shelter, so that I could support other women to remember what it was like to make decisions from love, not to choose to stay in places out of fear. And so by the time I was, in my 30s, working in innovation, one of the things I noticed when people were coming onto what I call my sandbox. So I used to run an innovation lab, and I used to welcome everyone to the lab and say, welcome to my sandbox. And I noticed right away that a lot of the people that were coming in ready to innovate were not innovating. And I couldn't figure out at first why, like what was getting in the way, because they were all coming in out of love, out of passion, out of, I really want to be innovative. I really want to come up with something new. And then once we would take off, they would hold back. And it wasn't clear at first until we started going through conversations. Fear, of course. Fear was getting in the way. Fear of failure, fear of being embarrassed, fear of being labeled, fear of being judged, fear of losing their jobs. Valid fears, don't get me wrong. But point of the story is, it was fear. And the reason why I noticed they couldn't move through it is because they wouldn't even acknowledge that they were afraid. I know, it's so simple. Sometimes, well, most of the time, in my experience, unless we acknowledge something, we're not going to be able to move through it. And I hear that often being said about like people with substance abuse problems. I've heard people that say the first step to recovery is accepting you have a problem, or accepting that you're an alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever type of addiction someone has. And in my experience, it's the same thing with anything we do in life. In this specific scenario with innovation, if innovation is not coming through from you, from your team, from the organization, what are people afraid of? What's getting in the way? That is like such big barrier. And yeah, so going back to that example of how it shows up at work, is I started noticing that people were just really, really worried for all of those things that I mentioned: being judged, being labeled, being made fun of. Even when we would have our group sessions and I would say, okay, let's start ideating, nobody wanted to ideate. People were being shy. about ideating. So I had to come up with very basic exercises to get the mind, the human part of innovation, to settle so that they would feel safe enough to start shooting ideas without feeling judged or rejected. And these are exercises that I identified as we moved through the journey. So it was a lot of fun. It's probably why I still do coaching in innovation. It's probably why, actually, I'm writing a book, and I'm going to tell you all about it on another episode. But I'm writing a book on the human side of innovation, because that moment at the beginning of those sessions is where I realized no matter if you have a great methodology, no matter if you have a great team, or if you have a great path to innovation, if you haven't acknowledged when there's fear in the room, it's not going anywhere. And I'm going to be very clear here. Sometimes, if there's 10 people in the team, only one of them is afraid. That person could be the one holding everything back. I'm telling you, I've seen it happen. So for that reason, that's an example of how fear gets in the way of your work. And yeah, I was reflecting really on fear and just how powerful it is, and the contrast of it, right? Love, and some people don't like to use the word love, or some people feel uncomfortable because they feel like if we're in a professional setting or work-related setting, why are we saying that word love? And what I tell them is, okay, let's just call it what you're passionate about. A lot of people, I hope, are doing a job that they're passionate about, or at least you started it because you were passionate about. And some people will say, no, actually, I have this job because I have to. And if I ask people, why did you take it? They would say, well, I need money to feed my kids, or, to live. Well, you're passionate about living, otherwise you would want to give up. The point of the story is decisions that we make come from a place of love, whatever we're passionate about, or a place of fear, whatever we're worried about. And it's important to acknowledge when those feelings show up. And if it's fear, it's important to get to know it. So this is what I'm getting at. So I've given you some examples of how fear shows up in everyday life, like me with my dog and worried about him being eaten by a bird, or in relationships, and how gray that area can get especially when we're in unhealthy relationships, or at work when we're thinking about innovation specifically. And the one thing that I feel people want to do right away when fear shows up is deny, deny, deny. No, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I don't know what you're talking about. No. And this reminds me of when I was in high school and I took a psychology class. And I remember the teacher, I think it was the first day, the first thing she said was, fake it till you make it. If there's anything you're going to take from this class, is fake it till you make it. And at the time, I was sitting there reflecting on that phrase, and I was thinking, I don't like that. I don't like the way that feels. I get what she's saying. Sometimes if you're not happy or if you're struggling, just smile, just fake that smile, and eventually it'll become real. And at that time, this is when I was, I don't know, I think it was about 15, 16. It just did not sit well with me at all. And as I got older, and especially when I started working as a coach, I avoid faking things. I avoid denying things, especially feelings, especially fear. So one of the things I often see is people denying that. I remember working with an executive who was very, very excited because he was just given a whole team, a whole department to go out and innovate. And they told him, like, this is it. We're making you head of this department. Here's a team. Here's even an assistant for you. Here's a partner for you. Like there's the two of you that are going to head this department. There's an assistant. There's a whole team. Go create something. Go innovate and come up with something that meets the the vision of the new strategy. He was so excited about it, and I was excited because he reached out to me. He said, "Hey, Beth, we're just doing this project, and I was given this task, and I have a new team, and we need some support in driving innovation. And not everyone in the team understands design thinking process or how to fit innovation into the process. So can you come help us?" So of course I said yes, and it was really exciting to watch the dynamic and to watch how him and his colleague as the leaders of the team were so open to a different way of working, a different style of working. And so we started really getting into it. And I would say a few weeks into it, we were just about to take off and we're just about to make really big decisions. And he started hesitating. And so I took him to the side and we had an offline, it was still a virtual call, but it wasn't with the rest of the team. It was just him and myself. And so I asked him, I said, okay, so we've made it this far. We're just about to, go out and present to the organization your concept of your solution. And I've noticed you keep delaying the presentation and we're wasting time. We have a short timeline. Innovation is quick, quick, quick. And he said, yeah. And so I asked him, well, what's happening? What's getting in the way? And he said, well, I'm just reflecting and I need some time to really absorb what the team came up with. And I just need a little bit of time to, break it down and understand it better. And part of my job as a coach is to challenge my clients, right? So I said, okay, just to be clear, you have been part of this creation since the beginning. You have been part of it every step of the way. So I'm wondering, what exactly are you curious about? Like, what's not sinking in yet? And he said, well, yeah, I understand the concept, and yes, I work with the team. I just feel like I just need a little bit of time. So of course I asked for permission. I say, may I challenge you on this? And he said, sure, go for it. And I just flat out asked him, I said, what are you afraid of? And I'll never forget how defensive he got. He said, oh, I'm not afraid of anything. And I said, well, it seems like you are afraid of something. I'm just wondering what it is. And he repeated, he said, I'm not afraid of anything. I don't know what you're talking about. So he sat there and he reflected. And I said, okay, well, what concerns do you have about, if I was to say, let's present this tomorrow to the organization, what are you concerned about? And he started saying, well, I'm just worried that it's not really a fit. I'm worried that the leadership team are not going to see eye to eye with the team. I'm worried that some of the team members are just new and they're not going to be able to present it to the level that the leadership needs to hear it. And I'm just worried that we might just get shut down. And I just looked at him and I said, okay, so you're worried? And he said, yes, I'm worried. And I said, well, what are you worried? Like, and then he said, well, I worry that if all those things are true, we're going to fail. And I'm just afraid we're going to lose our jobs. And I didn't say anything. And then he looked at me, he smiled, and he's like, oh, I guess I am afraid of something. And there you have it. So what I'm getting at with the story is fear will show up in different ways, through worry, concern, shame. Oh, it has so many feelings. And I'm curious to see, how you've experienced fear. Because I only know it from how I experience it and how the people I work with experience it. Even the way my cats experience fear. One of my cats is completely terrified of one of my dogs because she's really big. The dog has never hurt her, but my cat's afraid just because her energy is a little, the dog's energy. Her name is Sochi. She's about 90 pounds. Her energy is very like energized and, well, she's 90 pounds. And my cat, Pepper, she's a little shy and she really doesn't want to be pushed around or met, straight on with such a big energy. So part of my story is that's how I experience fear, through my own experiences, the people I work with, and the beings that I share my life with. But I wonder, like, how do you experience it? As I'm sharing all these examples, um, you know, are there perhaps emotions or reactions or feelings or sensations that are showing up that are currently in you that maybe you've been avoiding because it's fear? And like I said, some people just want to avoid it. It's not comfortable. It's not pretty. It's not the sexiest thing to feel. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. It's painful sometimes. So going back to fear and how it shows up, and how I've learned at a young age that some people just want to say, just fake it till you make it, pretend like it's not there. Well, pretending is not going to do anything with it. In this specific example with this executive that I work with, the moment he said, okay, I'm afraid, we were able to then move through each of those fears, each one that he presented, all those worries about the team's not ready, it's not in alignment with the strategy, they're not going to present it the way the leadership wants to hear it. We just took a look at it and started having a conversation with fear, because that's the thing. Instead of running away from it, the way I see it is, what if we sit down with it? It's coming from us. The way I see it, I'll speak for myself. It's coming from me. Fear is coming from me, from a part of me. And it's coming usually from a memory. Like, you're going to laugh maybe, bicycle riding. So I learned bicycle riding when I was 12. And I learned it really good. And I was really good at it. And then I never rode a bike again until I was 27. And I got on that bike. I was in Germany. I was studying in Germany. I get on my bike because all the students in Germany apparently had bicycles and I was supposed to have one. And so I get on the bicycle and I'm pedaling because I'm like, oh, I know I can do this. And it's all going fine until I turn. I forgot how to turn. Like, apparently I didn't turn many times when I was younger. But all I can tell you is the moment I turn, I just tilt over. So as a result of that, now there's fear within me that whenever I get on a bicycle now, I won't turn. I just want to go straight because I'm afraid I'm going to fall again. And I know I can overcome that. I know I can. I just have to face it. I have to get on the bicycle and I have to, over and over, do the turns. And eventually it'll come. And I'll overcome it faster once I get on it and I acknowledge that I used to be able to make turns, so I'm going to be able to do it again. So point of my story is, when we acknowledge the fear and we realize it's coming from a place of love. What I mean with that is, my fear of getting the bicycle comes from a place of love from within me to say, oh, please don't, Beth. You're going to turn left or right and you're going to fall. And the last time you did that, it hurt. And it did. Well, it hurt because I crashed into a car and that really hurt. Like, it was really painful. So my body, all it remembers is, you're going to crash into a car and you're going to hurt yourself, especially at my age. Not that I'm really old, I'm just saying. The last thing I need is to really hurt myself. What I'm getting at is, the fear is more often than not coming from a place of love, of concern. So when we take a moment to sit with it and to reflect and to get to know it, will understand the good intention that it has behind its existence. And then we can move through it with ease, with grace. We can say thank you. Thank you for showing up. Like the day with that executive, once we uncovered each one of those things, each one of those worries, as he called them, and we identify the core of it was he was afraid to lose his team. He was afraid that his team would lose their jobs. Like, how nice is that? He cares about the team. So we were able to uncover, where did that come from? Where, there's a warning there. There's something he remembered. I think it was 2-3 previous jobs ago. He had been fired because he led a team and they delivered something and the people were not happy with the delivery, so they fired everyone. It was something like that. And so rightfully so, that showed up. Rightfully so, right? And so once we understood that and we sat with it and we brought it out and we had a conversation about it, then he was able to move with grace and with ease and then make better decisions and feel more confident and feel more prepared. And even say, thank you, I'm glad that this showed up for me, that this fear showed up, this worry, this concern, because now I know how much this job means to me, this specific task, this role, these people. So when we think about fear, I'm going to invite you to reflect on, a good way to sit with it, to breathe through it. Of course, as a breathwork coach, I always talk about breathing, like breathe with it. And there's different techniques that you can practice. And some of you know breathwork, so good for you. Some of you don't know it. If you're interested, just follow me. We'll do some breathwork sessions one of these days. But point of the story is it's important to learn how to breathe through those uncomfortable feelings and sensations and emotions. And bringing that feeling or bringing that fear to our space, our safe space. We're choosing to bring it in and say, hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where do you come from? I walk people through some of the coaching sessions that I do through an exercise where we invite an emotion, in this case fear, and we invite it for coffee and we ask it questions like, what does it look like? Or I ask the client, when you invite it in, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Does it have a name? Does it have a color, a shape, a scent? Does it have a taste? Do you feel it anywhere specific in your body? Like, we go through all of that. We really want to know this fear. And once we meet it and we get to know it and we understand where it's coming from and we understand the positive intention that it has for showing up for us, we say thank you. We're grateful for it. And a lot of the times, the bigger the fear, the bigger the reward on the other side. The bigger the message, the bigger the clarity, the more intense and more powerful it is. So, yeah, this first episode, talking about fear, really sets the tone for me because I've been wanting to do this podcast for, I would say, about 4 years. And I hadn't done it out of fear. See, it's everywhere. I really wanted to do this because I had a vision about it. I had this feeling, people would tell me sometimes they really enjoy the conversations they have with me, or they really enjoy, when I do presentations, they really enjoy the talks and the topics and how I convey messages. And they ask me, why don't you do a podcast? Why don't you do, something? And I did. I started doing live videos, which I do on my Facebook page. And every week, every Monday, I do a live video on a message about something. And the something isn't like it could be anything, it just depends on what's moving that day in that moment. And then on Tuesdays I do them in Spanish, also on Facebook. And then I share them in my Instagram. So I've been doing that consistently for definitely this year, and I've been doing it consistently since 2018 or so. But then people started telling me, why don't you do a podcast? And I didn't, out of fear. I was afraid. I was afraid of, I don't know how, the technology is overwhelming. I was afraid of who am I? Who's gonna want to listen to my stuff? I was afraid of so many things. And last year I made a decision in November. I got some news that threw my whole life upside down. And I decided, what if I start implementing all of the tools and techniques that I work with my clients and put them into my life? What if I redesign my life? What if I use a design thinking process to help me through it? And what if I sit with my fears and move through them and start creating and birthing these visions that I have? And so here I am with the podcast. So I invite you to reflect on your fears. Where are they coming from? What are they wanting to remind you of? Sometimes they just want to remind us that what we're about to do is really important, or it matters so much. Or maybe they're trying to remind us, be careful. You already fell once. Don't hurt yourself again. Right? So for me, to wrap it up, fear is not a bad thing. Fear is another part of everything. And in my opinion, there's a gift in that fear. There's a message, a very beautiful message, and a very intimate message. And only you can unlock it. Only you can figure out what that is. And so with that, I'm inviting you to reflect on your fears, make a list. If you need help, reach out. You know where to find me. There's my Innovation page. There's my Facebook page. There's different ways that you can connect with me. And if you know someone that is going through a challenge where they can't make a decision, maybe share some of what I shared today if you found it helpful, and help them see that acknowledging the fear will definitely be a first step closer to making that decision, to moving forward instead of getting stuck. And especially right now when there's so much uncertainty in the world and there's so much stuff happening all over, it's important to recognize when the fears are showing up, when the fears are crawling into the space, and where are they coming from, and whose are they? Are they your fears or somebody else's fears? So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thank you for listening. I'm really, really grateful that I made the decision to do this. It feels good. It feels good, and I can only grow from here. We're constantly evolving. And I say that with a smile as I look out the window and I see the blue skies and the trees, some of them very naked because we're still in the winter, the last stages of winter. But I see, the signs of how nature is starting to shift things around and life is starting to come back again. And I hear the birds in the morning again. So we get to birth things, we get to create things. And depending on how we choose to see life, we get to come up with solutions to the challenges that we have. We get to have clarity so that we can make better decisions, informed decisions in every aspect of our life. So, yeah, with that, I'm wishing you an amazing, amazing rest of your day and your week and whatever time you're listening. And yeah, let's see what next week is all about. I'm always curious. I never know what it is. I just show up and go with the flow. That's what everything and nothing is about. And in the meantime, make sure to follow me. Make sure to subscribe if you're on the channel, on the YouTube channel. And let's stay connected. And let's just continue to have these conversations. I always tell people this phrase: when I grow, you grow, and when you grow, I grow. We're in constant exchange, in constant flow. So, yeah, with that, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to the first episode of Everything and Nothing. And I look forward to the next one. Until next time, bye.